Hey, I'm Brent Hall, and today I'm going to be talking about the Galaxy Note 8. But before we get into that, real quick, for those of you who are new to my channel, I'm a professional photographer and videographer based in New Mexico. And here on my channel, I do all kinds of stuff. Everything from tutorials, reviews, to vlogs, nature and wildlife, all kinds of stuff. So if you haven't already, I'd really appreciate it if you go subscribe to the channel and you can get more stuff like this and keep up to date with everything else I'm doing. Alright, let's get back into it. So the reason we're here today is because I managed to get my hands on a new Galaxy Note 8, and that's this guy right here. I was able to get it a couple of weeks early, kind of surprisingly, so I figured that since I had this time and there's not too much else on it right now, I'd go ahead and do a review. Being a photographer, I'm definitely mostly interested in the camera, both for stills and for video, and how well it can help me as a professional photographer with not just the camera and stuff, but also with the photography apps and tools and stuff like that. So I'll touch on some of those a little bit, but mostly I'm going to be talking about the camera and how it performs. Alright, let's go over a couple of things, basic things about the camera real quick. The rear camera has the same main lens as the S8 and I think even the S7. So it's a wide angle lens. I think it's 28mm equivalent, f1.7 at 12 megapixels, so all that's really nice. And I don't think there's any improvement at all over the S8, the S8 Plus in terms of actual hardware for that. The thing that differentiates the Note from every other phone is that now they've included a second rear camera lens, and that is the telephoto lens. And Samsung says that it's about a 2 times telephoto lens. So if the wide angle is 28, then it's roughly between 50 and 60 millimeters. They didn't give an exact millimeter equivalent, or at least I haven't found one yet, but that's an approximation. So there's a few things that come along with that telephoto lens that are really great. First thing is for portraits, for getting closer to things, for cropping in on landscapes, stuff like that. When you're shooting portraits, it's more flattering if you're shooting at a normal focal length like 50 millimeters than a wider one. So that's really nice. Secondly, the first big feature that I want to talk about, of course, that everybody is talking about is the live focus. The live focus is the newest feature, and the reason why we can do it is because of the telephoto lens that they put on back here. So it does a lot of cool things. I think it works really well, but there are some caveats with it. So first, let's look at how it works and what it does. And one cool feature of it, of course, is that it gives you the ability to adjust the background blur before and after you shoot, and then it will save that separately. So that's a really cool new feature, and I think it's really going to help out with just people's portraits and just creativity in general. You can use it for not just portraits, but you can use it for anything really, you know, when you're trying to really show focus on one subject. So that's really cool. Okay, a couple more basic things. Both of the lenses are optically stabilized, so they both have the OIS, which is the optical image stabilization, and that's a really great feature. It's really going to help out for low light stuff, especially. Okay, so a couple of other basics. It has an ISO range of a base of 50 all the way up to 800, and I've been playing around with this a little bit. One thing that I'm not really interested in is, yeah, it does get noisy. It's a cell phone sensor. The sensor's like this big, you know, so don't think too much of those numbers in terms of DSLR equivalents, because like if I'm shooting with my DSLRs, ISO 800 on any of them, even the crop body cameras, is no big deal. But ISO 800 on this is a big deal. It's gonna be noisy. It's even gonna be noisy in certain situations if you're pushing it, you know, 200 or more. So I did do a couple of test shots, but I didn't push it too hard. Even though you can bump it up to 800 unless you really need that shot, if you're focused on photography or getting a good image, you definitely want to keep it as low as possible. So in regards to that too, let's talk about shutter speed. This has a pretty big range of a shutter speed. It goes all the way from 1/24,000th of a second, which is pretty impressive on the fast end, all the way up to 10-second exposures on the long end, which is also pretty impressive. If you couple that with a nice little tripod, or put it on any tripod or whatever, and keep that nice and stable, you're going to be able to do some really cool low light stuff that traditionally we haven't been able to do with cell phones before, at least within the last couple of years. Alright, let's talk about the next big feature that I personally am pretty stoked about, especially as an Android user. We haven't had this until the S8, maybe the S7, and I think I'm pretty sure the Google phones have had it maybe for the last year or so. But anyways, it's the ability to shoot in RAW. So we can shoot in a RAW file now, and it'll save it as a RAW DNG. There are a couple of caveats with that. Okay, so the first, let's talk about that real quick. So the first caveat is that you can only shoot RAW. You have to enable the RAW shooting, and it will save a RAW and a JPEG. Okay, so also the other caveat with the RAW shooting is that you can only shoot RAW if you're in Pro mode. And the Pro mode is where they let you control all of the other, they give you full manual control of everything but the aperture, of course, but you have full manual control of the shutter, the ISO, the white balance, even the focal points. So that all of that stuff is really nice. Alright, let's talk a little bit more about the live focus. So like I said, I did a lot of playing around with this. I found that it generally works pretty well. It is a little bit finicky though. Sometimes, depending on, you have to kind of be in a sweet spot of a distance from your subject. If you're too close, it'll tell you to back up, or it'll tell you you need to be at least 4 feet away or something like that. On the other hand, if you're too far back, it just won't work. It'll say, a lot of times it just said, all it said was, live focus can't work in these conditions. So that's a little weird. It's a little finicky. Sometimes also, if you're too far back, but you're still within the range for it to be working, sometimes it'll like flip-flop on you, and it'll go onto the wrong part of the subject, or it'll focus on the background and it'll blur your subject out. So you have to kind of be paying attention to where the focus is hitting and make sure that it's not flipping on you. So that's one little thing about the finickiness. But like I said, most of the time, I would say greater than 75 to 90% of the time. That seems like an odd statistical number. That's like one of those 80% of all statistics are made up things. Anyways, I would say the majority of the time it definitely does what it should and how it should, and I've really enjoyed working with it. I've really enjoyed the results from it. So the ability to adjust it after you shoot it is really cool. And then also I should mention that it after you shoot it and then you adjust it again, you can adjust it as many times as you want. Every time you do that and then you hit OK, it will save another copy. So it'll save multiple copies at whatever level you've adjusted it, which is really cool. Also, when you're shooting in like the auto mode or whatever with the telephoto lens, that like you're doing if you're in live focus, another cool feature is that you take the image, and then after you take the image, because it has the dual cameras, it actually takes, I think it takes a shot with both lenses, and then what it does is it gives you the option to, do you want the close-up one that you shot, or do you want the wide angle? And you click on it and it'll show you the wide angle shot of that. Another thing that I really like is that it has the timer function, and it has a 2, 5, or 10-second timer. So this is really nice if you want to do selfies, but not necessarily like this selfie, but like a environmental selfie, and you want to have it on a tripod or something, and then you can have it 10-second timer, and then you go run into place and get with your family or get in position or whatever. So that's really nice. It's also, of course, really great for long exposures. That way you can have time while it's on the tripod for you to touch it, because when you touch it, it's going to shake everything a little bit. So it'll have time, either 2, 5, or 10 seconds, to stop shaking and calm down, and then it'll take the shot your long exposure, and then that'll help it come out more stable and sharper image. So the timer is really cool. But let's talk about time lapses real quick. So like I said, if you know my channel at all, if you've seen any stuff that I do a lot of time lapses. They're probably one of the biggest parts of my business, but more than that, they're just fun. I love doing them. I do them all the time for everything. So I wanted to try out time lapses on here, and this does have a hyperlapse mode, and I tried that out. The downfall is there are no settings for the hyperlapse mode. You put it in there and you hit record, you can't do anything else. You can't change anything. You can't do it in pro mode. It's all auto. There are no settings. There are no interval settings either. So that's what makes it a bummer. And what I found out is that it does roughly 1 minute of record time is going to equal about 1 second of playback time. So if you want 10 seconds of playback time, you're going to need to let it record for 10 minutes. So I tried that out, and there's no dedicated time lapse function with the built-in camera, but there are third-party apps. So I did that. I have had for a few years now an app called Lapse It Pro, and I think it's just costs a couple of bucks for the pro version, and it's pretty powerful. So I tried out a couple of time lapses with that. However, it's not quite up to date, I think, to keep up with the newest sensors and the new all that. But for now, just know that there is no dedicated time lapse feature. There is the hyperlapse, but there's zero control. So if you want time lapses, you're gonna either have to. The other way you can do it is just stick it in movie mode and get your movie settings, and then you can be in pro and you can adjust all of your settings, and then you just hit record and then speed it up by, like, you know, a few thousand% or so, and then that will make you a nice time lapse. Alright, so on the heels of talking about time lapse, let's fade away from photo and talk about video for a moment, because again, I want to know what this can do video wise. I want to know if it's going to be viable for me to shoot maybe not B-roll, but even more like C camera type stuff, or if I need to use it for a vlog in a pinch, or if I just need whatever. If I don't have my cameras and I want to make something nice, little visuals of my family or vacation or something, how is this going to do for me? So first of all, the biggest thing, obviously, it shoots 4K. There are some caveats with that. Again, as with everything else, it's a cell phone, so it does give you the pro mode, just like the photo mode. You go into pro mode, you can adjust all your settings. You can have it in 4K, obviously. As far as I know, it only does 30p. There's no option for 24p or 30p or 60p. It's just 4K 30p. Anyway, so back to the pro settings. Let's talk about manual focus real quick. This does have the ability to control manual focus both before and during shooting, which is nice. It's a little weird to do because of the holding and scrolling with your thumb on here like that, but it's pretty smooth when you get it. And the reason why I say manual focusing, because if you want to pull focus, like shifting from your subject to your background and then back or whatever, or changing subjects, the autofocus, it will let you touch autofocus and tap to where you want it focused during shooting, but it is not smooth. It's not like my Canons, you know, my 5D Mark IV, my 1DX2. They are super smooth when I touch, and then you can control them. But they're also multi-$1,000 cameras, so that's to be expected. So the reason why I say manual focus again is because if you try shifting autofocus while you're filming, you're going to get some seriously harsh clicks. It's just going to be like bam, bam. There's no smoothness in between. So the manual focus is there. Having the ability to do it before and after is nice. Having the ability to lock on manually is nice. A couple of other things about the 4K. It's nice that it's stabilized this time. I'm coming from a Note 4. I've had that Note 4 for a long time. It did do 4K. It does do 4K still, but there's no optical stabilization. There's no image stabilization with the 4K on my old phone. So that's nice to have that now. I think that's probably been around from the S8 and maybe even an S7, but I haven't had it yet. So that's nice. It's still not great though. You know, when you're holding it, if you're sure-footed and you know, you really steady and stuff like that, it'll be pretty smooth. But it's not going to take away, it's not going to come close to like an actual glide cam or an actual stabilizer of some sort. So if you have like a little mini stabilizer for your phone or your GoPro or something, that obviously is going to be the best way to go. But you are going to be able to get away with a little bit more handheld than without it, of course. So that's nice. The Note 8 does do slow motion. There is a setting, a video setting for slow motion. However, it is not in 4K. It's only in 1080p. It does 1080p 60p, and I think that's all it is. I think it's only 60p. So there's no 120, there's no 240, which is a really big bummer. I was hoping for at least 120 frames per second in 1080p even. But there's only 60p. The other downside to that is that there is no HDR, there are no video effects, and there is no tracking focus for the slow motion mode and for the 4K and UHD modes. So only in regular 1080p modes do you get those options for video. Alright, last thing about the video is there are no, like I mentioned before, again, this is coming from a professional standpoint. This is really not a big deal, but it's just worth mentioning because someone will probably invariably mention it somewhere, sometime in the comments or whatever. There's no flat profile and there's no log-like profile. Of course, I don't expect log in a phone, although I would not turn it down. That would be cool, but I don't expect it. But what there are custom picture profiles in here, and there are 2 of them that are custom, so you can reduce the saturation, reduce the contrast, just like you would on a DSLR if you're trying to get that flat profile. And what that does is obviously that helps you for editing and post, that helps you to bring back and capture a little bit more dynamic range. I haven't experimented too much with that yet. I just really started piddling with that this morning before this review, so I'm not really going to go into that. I just wanted to note that it's there, and it's worth experimenting with if you think you might be more heavily editing, if you're not just going to film this on your phone, edit it on your phone, and then upload it to social media. It's also worth mentioning that if you want to edit your photos on your phone or send them to your tablet or whatever, Lightroom Mobile and Photoshop Express both have the ability to edit the raw files that you can now save when you're shooting in the pro mode on this thing, and I really enjoy that. Again, don't compare these. If you are familiar with DSLRs and point and shoots that do shoot raw, don't compare these to a raw image from something from the likes of them, because again, remember, this sensor is about this big. The DSLR sensor, even a APS-C and a point and shoot sensor are bigger than your cell phone sensor. But it's nice that it is raw. It's not compressing it. It's a DNG file. You can bring out a little bit more. You can drop those highlights a little bit more. You can boost those shadows a little bit more. You can just push it a little bit harder than you would a JPEG. And any little increase in dynamic range and raw ability and being able to just edit just a little bit more is great. So definitely check out the Lightroom Mobile and the Photoshop Express. I would say the difference is Lightroom Mobile is a little more powerful in that it's traditionally set up more like the regular Lightroom, so if you use that, you'll be very familiar with all the sliders and everything. But it also gives you the ability to do selective edits, which is really nice. So you can go in there, and if your subject's really backlit, like I was talking about earlier, and your eyes are real dark, whatever, you can go in there and do a selection over just the eyes and increase the exposure and increase the clarity on just the eyes and bring that up. You could do a gradient filter and dehaze and increase clarity and drop the exposure of just the top, just the clouds, just the sky. And all of that stuff just helps to push creativity and just to make better images. So definitely check out the Lightroom Mobile and the Adobe Photoshop Express. Those are 2 great free apps. And if you have Adobe already, like Lightroom and Photoshop, you can log in on your mobile and then sync that and then send them over the cloud and then pull them straight to when you get home or on your laptop or whatever. So all that's really super convenient. So I would definitely recommend checking those apps out. So hopefully this review's gone over enough stuff covering the photo and video capabilities of the Note 8, and it will help you make your decision on whether or not you want to upgrade to it. If you have any other questions about anything that I missed, the technical specs or anything like that, my workflow, any of the apps that I use, anything regarding the photo video capabilities of the Note 8, make sure you leave them in the comments below and I'll get back to you. And like I said in the beginning, if you haven't already, definitely make sure you subscribe to my channel and go check out the rest of my tutorials and vlogs and reviews and all that good stuff. And I will see you in the next video.